Welcome to the Separation Anxiety in Dogs Decoded podcast. I am your host, Ness Jones, and we'll be deep diving into all things separation anxiety. But before we get started, please make sure you like this episode, subscribe to the channel, and turn on your notifications so you never miss another one. And don't forget, if you are interested in joining my easy step-by-step training program to resolve separation anxiety in your dog, you'll find the link in the show notes. Now let's get started. Hello. So today we are going to be talking about how the dog reacts differently for different family members when they're undergoing a training. This came through from somebody. It was a listener question. Unfortunately, they didn't provide their first name, so I can't tell you who it is. So sorry. But they do say, I would love you to talk a bit about what to think about when the separation anxiety shows up differently with different family members. Is it best to try and keep the same routines with everyone for continuity, or is it better to tackle it as a separate process, as in thinking of it as training separation with family member A and training with family member B, and so on? So it's a really good question, and it certainly is true that dogs will react differently for different people. So what often happens with my clients is when we start out, we have a foundation plan, and that is the plan that is the easiest for the dog. And you'll hear me talk about having all their needs met, all those sort of things, time of day, the one where they're most likely to rest and relax at any point of the day. But what we also find is that for some dogs, they do better with different family members. If you think, for example, that it's usually the mum, because mums are usually the primary caregivers. The dog often bonds more with her or whoever the primary caregiver is. Now, that will depend on every household, every different, situation, etc. But often it is the mum, simply because they do most of the care. So that dog might bond more with mum, and so the training might be harder for the dog when mum's doing it because they don't want mum to leave. It could be the other way around. It could be dad is the be-all and end-all, and they can't bear to be without them, and it's harder for them to cope when dad walks out the door, or whoever it is, for whatever reason that dog feels that they are going to struggle more being left alone by that person. So when we're starting out, we want this foundational plan to be as easy as possible for the dog. So sometimes that can mean picking the person to do the training that the dog is not going to struggle as much with. And again, that is going to depend on the situation and the dog. What we can often find is, for example, training with one person, the dog is doing fine, but then you add in another person, or maybe the whole family going out, the dog is going to find it harder to cope. I often have clients where we have several plans in place. So the foundational plan, which is the easiest one for the dog, we get up to a nice solid time. It could be half an hour. And then we start complicating it and making it harder. So we're still pushing with that foundational plan, but now we're going to add in some other plans that are separate to that. And that could be somebody else training, or it could be, if it's a couple, maybe both of them doing the training together. One example of that is a client I had a while back. She worked from home. Her partner worked out of home, so she did most of the training. And then when we added in her partner, it was a completely separate plan. So she had built up this beautiful time, longer and longer and longer. Then we introduced them training together, and we dropped the time back. It was a separate plan for them training together because the dog really did struggle more with two people. So it really will depend on your dog's relationship with all the members of the household. We do expect them perhaps not to do as well with one person or more people doing it. It will depend on your household, your setup, but I think we have to acknowledge that it is possible that your dog is going to find it harder to cope with maybe, the whole household going out, especially if it's a family with children, or maybe two people, or maybe one other person different doing the training. Just a caveat too. So I have had clients where the primary caregiver, usually the mum, has done all the training. She's watched all the videos, the onboarding videos, what to look for when she's doing the training. And then hubby's come along and said, oh, I can do this, and does the training and doesn't really know what he's looking at, and has completely ruined the training, and the dog's had a meltdown, gone backwards, and we've had to reset the whole process again. So we do have to be really, really careful that if somebody new is doing the training, that they actually understand what they're watching, what they're looking at, what the dog is going through, if they're coping or not, because otherwise we could have a really bad detrimental effect on the training. So that's really, really important. So what I have done in those instances where I've had a couple, she's done all the training, we've got up a nice time, and then we want to introduce him doing the training by himself. I've actually got her to leave prior to the training, maybe 10, 15 minutes before he starts doing the training, and then she will be outside. So she's on hand if something happens. So the dog thinks she's left, but she's actually outside, making sure that when her partner is doing the training, that she's there just to make sure everything goes smoothly, so we don't have an oops. So yes, we acknowledge different family members, we can get different results. So starting with an easy peasy foundational plan that's the easiest for the dog. We know they're the most settled that they're going to be throughout the course of their day. Working on that, building up a really good solid time for that, and then think about, okay, now what do we have to do? What's our next priority? How are we going to start complicating it? And what is our next plan going to look like? Remembering that you're going to have two plans running side by side. Your foundational plan, which we're building the time, and then your new plan, which could be a different person doing the training. It could be more than one person doing the training, or it could just be something like a change of time of day. So dogs often struggle more in the mornings, not necessarily, it just depends. Some dogs like to lie in bed in the morning. But some dogs will struggle in the morning. So that's going to be a complication. So therefore, we keep with our solid foundational plan. We introduce this new plan where maybe the dog is going to find it a bit harder, but that time is going to be a lot less. And we're going to just build up on that as well. So hopefully that answers your question. Yes, I would definitely tackle them as separate, unless everybody is actually going to do the training all at once, and then you just start with that. But bear in mind that it could complicate things. I like to start off with plans that are uncomplicated and easy for the dog, because we just want to build up that solid bank of safe absences. Once we have that, then we look at complicating it. Why start early with complications when we can add them in and do it mindfully and gradually and structure it in a way that the dog isn't going to struggle as much. You have been listening to Ness Jones on the Separation Anxiety in Dogs Decoded podcast. Don't forget to check out the show notes to learn more about my programs and how I can help you with tailored training. Until next time.